This is the How Design Live podcast, hosted by programming partner Elise Benin, national speaker, author of 7 business books for creative professionals, and founder of marketing-mentor.com. Listen to her lively conversations with past and future How Design Live speakers about the business of creativity and creativity in business. Here's Elise Benin.
Have you dreamed of having your own art or artistic creations turned into a global sensation, splashed across products from sheets and housewares to toys and t-shirts? If so, then you need to know about licensing, and I've found the perfect person to teach you. Jeanette Smith, who recently shared what she knows about licensing at How Design Live, is the one who turned the Dilbert comic strip into a $200 million global brand and the first corporate icon. In our interview, I asked her exactly how she did that. Welcome, Jeanette, to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Elise.
And I like to just have my guests introduce themselves right off the bat, so please do.
Well, I'm Jeanette Smith, and I'm the owner of All Art Licensing, and we're a consulting, agenting, and coaching business for creators who want to learn how to utilize, marketing and licensing to create an income from their art.
So I'm going to ask you momentarily what the heck licensing is for those who don't know. But let's just go to your bio first, because it says Jeanette Smith turned the Dilbert comic strip into a $200 million a year brand. So please tell us exactly how you did that.
Well, I was fortunate to work for a company called United Media. And as their vice president, I was assigned with this unknown comic strip called Dilbert. It was in about 100 papers. And it was very exciting to have a comic that, it just made me laugh. And I knew that there was a very broad potential audience for it. That we were.
Wait, why did you know that? How did you know that?
I knew that it was hitting an audience that had never been hit before with a comic strip, meaning the corporate audience. Mm-hmm. So it was funny, and it had a potentially very large target audience. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I encourage all creators to look at if they're looking to create a large amount of money. Do you have an audience that will actually, be large enough to do what you want to accomplish?
So maybe we can come back to that question, because I think that one stumps a lot of people. So after what is licensing, let's say, how do you know if you have an audience? But keep going with your story, please.
Okay. So it was really fun to see the comic strip come out, and it was growing in the number of newspapers slowly but surely. But I realized that, and statistics were telling me that the number of comic readers in newspapers was going down, as is the number of newspapers across the nation. So the ability to actually reach the large potential audience in corporations, government, other kinds of institutions that would really get the Dilbert humor about, big bosses and big management. We just weren't going to reach them unless we broke out of a comic strip. And that was what I set as my goal. And I kept thinking about it. And what kept coming to my mind was how I wanted to be in the Wall Street Journal. Dilbert and the Wall Street Journal were just this perfect match. But the Wall Street Journal didn't allow comics. It never did. And it had this huge history of, it was very proud of the fact that it didn't have comics. And so I kept racking my brain about, how can I think out of the box? How can I get into the Wall Street Journal? So what I decided to do was to find a sponsor to run an advertisement. And then within this small advertisement that ran every day, we could just put the Dilbert comic strip and then the sponsor's logo and say sponsored by blah, blah, blah. And every day I was able to, through a sponsor, have the Dilbert comic run, and all of a sudden we had all these new people that were loving Dilbert, didn't care if he was a comic or not. It was just this splash of humor amidst the business pages of the Wall Street Journal. And that really set us apart, and leaps and bounds it took us into that business world. So now when I was looking at licensing the cartoon strip or images from the cartoon on products, we really could say that we were really able to increase our audience and start talking about numbers. And that's actually how I was able to market Dilbert for books. And Scott had some great concepts for books, but all of a sudden we were now looked at as a business book rather than a comic strip book.
And so what are the lessons from that story, that experience, that anyone could apply to themselves? I mean, one thing I hear is you need to establish an audience first. Is that right?
We just touched on that. Yeah. And, there's people who want to be the best creator in their neighborhood. Then there's others who want to do it in their state or their country or the world. So you have to think about what you want to do. And then you have to look at what you're creating, whether it's a cartoon character or designs or a brand, and see whether what you want to do with it and what you're creating are a match.
So let's go back then to what is licensing.
Okay, so licensing is basically a lease agreement between a creator who creates art or cartoon. It also could be an author, and they're basically leasing their creativity to a manufacturer or a sponsor or advertiser. But it's that agreement. And what it does is it allows for the copyright and trademarks and all the creativity to be legally held by the creator and just leased out for a certain length of time within a certain, say, target audience or on a certain product. So in other words, the contract defines the usage and the creator holds the rights.
And what kind of creators is licensing ideal for?
Oh, I think licensing is ideal for all creators. And this is a message, thank you, that I really want to get out to people, because if you're designing patterns or you're painting pictures or you're illustrating, an illustrator, or you're a photographer or an author, anytime you create something, you can sell it. You can do it as a work for hire and be hired by somebody, and you can create it for them and then you're done. Or you can create it for yourself and sell, one piece of art. But licensing allows you to use the same piece of art or creativity or concept. So for a television show, a creative concept, and use it over and over again and continue to make royalties and money from it. So I think that licensing should be something every creator knows about, and they should keep it in their toolkit, because sometime there will be a point where licensing is a better and more profitable business model than work for hire, which is the alternative.
But isn't there also more recently another alternative, which is if I'm a creator and I create, whether it's a comic strip or a character or a pattern or a design, and I can now go directly to the market. Why do I need the licensor? Is that who it is, the licensor?
No, actually the licensee. So okay. You as the creator are the licensor, okay. And who the manufacturer that you might go to is the licensee. Mm-hmm. And that's a great question, because I love the two things I love are the technology that is coming to us today so that we can be entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, and we can go out and we can create, not only sell to a global audience, but we can utilize print on demand services and things like that. So I love that you can do that, or if you have the funds to design a line of clothing and actually manufacture them and sell them. I would not want to discourage anybody from doing that and from owning it and producing product. But there's a lot of artists who don't have, they might have the ability on a very small scale to actually manufacture product, and then distribution becomes a challenge. So I think that licensing allows you to work with partners that are experts in production, warehousing, distribution, marketing, things like that. So I think that certainly it's always been an option to manufacture yourself and produce for yourself and sell. And I think people should always look at that. But there's a lot of people who don't have the capital to get into business that way.
And so, as a licensor,
Mm-hmm.
what am I giving up to the licensee to take over the production and to upfront the capital to make my creation, to manufacture my creation and distribute it?
Well, you're giving up certainly a percentage of your profits. Most people, they are surprised that licensing royalties might range anywhere from 3% to, at a very, very high end, 18%. It's a pretty wide range, but when they look at that and they say, well, what's that percentage off of? And that percentage is off of the net wholesale cost. So now, if something costs $10 at retail, the net wholesale cost would probably be half of that or a little less. That is what you are multiplying the 3% times or the 5% times. So you are giving up a lot of income, but you've got to decide, do you have the capital to front the, production and to manage the, do the warehousing, manage the distribution, do the marketing. They have those systems in place, and so you are giving up something. But when you license, say, a piece of art, I know I had one client who, on one piece of art, she had like 20 different licenses. It happened to be a Santa Claus, but when you see that you can take one piece of art and have like 20 different products and licenses with that one piece of art, you may have given up a lot, but you now have it out in the marketplace with a lot of licensees, manufacturers, and you are able to maybe accomplish something you couldn't have otherwise done.
So there's no exclusivity in terms of the licensees.
There can be exclusivity if it's written into the contract, and the manufacturer might pay extra for that. But in the example I was giving, there is no exclusivity because there were 20 different products. So you usually don't compete with yourself. Like, I wouldn't take the same image and license it to 2 greeting card companies. That wouldn't be productive for either me or the licensees. But I would do a license for greeting cards, and then I would go do one for t-shirts, and then I would go do one for ceramic boxes, and then I would go do one for fabric, and there are so many different products you can do that you're able to generate a number of different licenses with the same art.
And who has the upper hand in that relationship? Is it the creator who chooses the licensees, or the licensees who choose the licensors or creators?
Great question, Elise. It really is the licensee. The manufacturer does have an upper hand because they're choosing the artists, the creators, the cartoonists, whoever just like the publisher is choosing the author that they want to work with, until you build up a reputation. But creators need to think of it this way when they get into licensing, because it's really big business. It's if somebody's creating bed sheets, and they can produce white bed sheets, and then they can ink them, and they can produce colors. But all of a sudden they want to do more than just a rainbow of colors. Oh, now they want to target children. Well, they can go license Barbie. But they want to do boys, so let's go license Transformers. But I want women, more women, and so now let me go find an artist who does coastal prints, and let me go find someone who will do infant designs for my layette. So a manufacturer has an operation, and they need licenses. They need artists and creators and cartoonists and brands to help diversify their production. And so they have the upper hand in that they're choosing from an array of licenses and licensors, but they need you as much as you need them. In the long run, they really can't take their business and grow it into children and infants and women and men and teenagers and tweenagers without all of this different creative.
And I'm glad you made the analogy to the publishing industry, because I think about these two things similarly,
I do too.
right? And so how do the licensees find the creators? Do creators pitch? Are there agents involved? Is that what you do? How exactly does that? Or do people go to the licensing expo?
Well, yeah, let me explain. And I have always worked in publishing and licensing, so I really feel a lot of symbioticness between them. However, there are some differences in the industries, and I know that in the publishing industry, say with the publishing industry is really changing with ebooks and your ability to self-publish, just like print on demand and products. But in the traditional publishing industry, they really, really want you to have an agent. And one of the differences is that in licensing, especially if you're starting off in art licensing or starting with a new character that you're launching through art licensing and then building, you can actually be your own agent. So that's one thing that I think is very exciting. Publishing, you need an agent. Licensing, you can go it on your own. You can give it a shot.
Is that smart?
It can be. It can be very smart, because the more you build your business, the more you have to leverage at some point when somebody wants to represent you. Doesn't mean you don't need to get some advice. You need to really educate yourself. I find that a lot of my clients come to me at forks in the road. They really need some advice as to which direction to go. Then they may go off and do the things I instruct them to do, and then come back to me at another fork in the road. So in other words, they don't need ongoing coaching or consulting, but they need help at certain points in their business growth. So I do agent and I do coach and consult and have training classes. And I think that I like seeing artists represent themselves if that's something they're fit for. And we talk a lot about that. What are the qualities you need to really be able to represent yourself? And when at what point does it make sense for you to go find an agent, and how do you find a good one?
Right. Okay, so I think we were still answering one of those questions, though, because I'm very curious about the Licensing Expo. Where does that fit in?
Yes. The Licensing Expo is really the world's largest licensing trade show. And it happens in Las Vegas each May. It's starting to be May this year. It was June before. And in the booths at the trade show are the properties or the licensors. So it's artists, it's brands, fashion brands, it's celebrities, it's the big gun publishers and the big gun properties like your Disneys and Nickelodeon and things like that, Scholastic. So people who are walking the Licensing Expo are the manufacturers and the people that are looking to find the properties that are going to enhance their production and expand their business. So it's a great way to find manufacturers. I find that the Licensing Expo is especially good for people who are launching new characters and want to learn about the business. It's good for artists, but there's another show that's even better for artists, which is the Surtex show, which is in New York in May. And that's more for artists and designers and pattern designers, illustrators. So there's a number of different shows for licensors, and then artists can go to the housewares show, the stationery show, the gift show, and they can walk around and they can meet the manufacturers there as well as a way to market themselves.
So when they go to the Licensing Expo, they're the ones with the booth. The artists have the booth, and
Yes.
that sounds like a very expensive proposition.
It can be. It can be. Licensing Expo has been really good. They've done some very low-end booths, and they call them launch pads. And I like that idea because it really gives the new creators a chance to get exposure at the show. And frankly, people love the new creators because they don't come in with, pre-existing ideas and concepts. Yeah, they're the trendsetters often.
Interesting. Okay. And then the shoe is on the other foot. If they are looking for manufacturers within a specific industry, they can go to the gift show or the housewares show, and they would be the ones walking the booths, and their prospects are in the booths.
Right. They'd be walking around looking at the houseware manufacturers, the giftware manufacturers, the sportswear manufacturers. Depending on what show you go to, there's an infant products. I mean, there's juvenile products industry, stationery, sportswear, apparel. There, every industry has its own trade show. So, and in fact, on my website, allartlicensing.com, there's a resource page, and I list the links to probably 15 or more trade shows.
And this is a question I get a lot. Mm-hmm. When you're walking the show like that and you're talking to the people in the booth, do they want to hear from you? Do they have time for you, or are they there for something else?
Well, they are there definitely for something else, but I think that a professional artist and person can always make it work, because if you can look for a gap in the conversation, just walk up and say, hi, I'm Jeanette Smith. I'd really love to get your card and send you an email with my portfolio. People are usually really responsive and say, that would be great. Here's my card. In other words, and if they're open, they might say, well, show it to me now. But you wait for that invitation.
And so you should bring whatever it is you want to share with you.
But don't expect that you're going to show it a lot. And you'll probably be thrilled if you have 2 or 3 chances to do so, and it'll be well worth it. You'll learn so much about the industry that, of the trade show you've attended. And just meeting people face to face will be very valuable.
Yes, I'm a huge fan of in-person, real-time networking.
Yeah.
Okay,
absolutely.
so
Me too.
I'm going to ask you to give your website again, but before I do, I have one final question before we wrap up, because I would be remiss, of course, to not ask you about the Trump brand and the Trump licensing empire without being partisan. I'm very curious if you have a perspective on that.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by a perspective on it without being partisan. I did meet Donald Trump a couple times in New York.
At the Licensing Expo?
No, actually, I was in the travel business when I first moved to New York in the 80s, when he wrote The Art of the Deal. And I was an editor for travel magazines and went to press conferences and got to meet him. And I mean, it's been fascinating to watch the brand grow. And I mean, I think that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, but I think that, he certainly has a lot of people think what they're going to think. I mean, but the brand it is a brand, and he does have a connection with that name. And
I guess, I'm sorry, I hope I maybe my question isn't clear. I guess I'm curious from a licensing professional point of view, what is your take on that brand?
Oh, from a licensing, I would say it's pretty hot right now. And I mean hot, not necessarily in a good way. I think it's just a little too volatile for somebody to license extensively right now. Because I think there's going to be positive and there's going to be criticism, but I think that, it's certainly well known, but I think it's going through a real image change as to what it stands for.
Interesting. All right, good. So, Jeanette, thank you. This has been very helpful and informative and lots of practical information. And you said you have some resources on your website, so spell it out so people can find it.
Yes, we are at Art licensing, LICENSING, allartlicensing.com. And the blog has a lot of valuable information. It's pretty much all information you can use immediately, and I love getting questions and welcome them. And they're on our resources page. Yeah, we've got lots of links for public relations and trade shows and things that I think people will appreciate.
Excellent. Thank you again so much for sharing your knowledge, and we will hopefully see you again soon.
I hope so. Thanks, Elise.
You've been listening to the How Design Live podcast with Elise Bennon, the programming partner for How Design Live. You can subscribe to this podcast in the iTunes Store or on SoundCloud. We hope you found it both inspiring and practical, like everything How Live. And we hope to see you at the next How Design Live, May 2nd through 6th, 2017 in Chicago. Get all the details at www.howdesignlive.com.